Hello and welcome to Straightforward, a brand new podcast here from the Special Competitive Studies Project about Taiwan, an island at the center of technological innovation and the global fight for democracy. I'm Channing Lee.
And I'm Libby Lange. And Channing, I am so excited to be here today for the first episode of this podcast.
Me too. And before we get started, why are we even doing this?
Yeah, I think we've really seen that Taiwan has been at the center of some of the biggest news stories and the biggest geopolitical issues, and that's really only grown in importance over the last few years, right?
And I find this really interesting personally because Taiwan used to just be a part of my personal life, right? You have, your personal life and your professional life. I grew up in Southern California. There's a huge Taiwanese diaspora there. My parents are from there. My family is from there. I still have family in Taiwan. And, going to Chinese school growing up with, the Taiwanese, Chinese American community, going to church, it just all was part of my personal life. I didn't really talk about it outside of that. And now, though, here in Washington, D.C., of course, it is a hot topic. And all of a sudden, I'm finding that, sure, I was trained, as a China analyst, et cetera. But Taiwan really is at the forefront of all these conversations, especially around geopolitics, technology, the future of national security. And so it's just really fascinating for me to be here and host these conversations. So I'm very excited. But Libby, I'm really interested for you to share as well. You're from Iowa. How did you even come to know of Taiwan?
Yeah, so my story with Taiwan starts a little bit later in life. Basically, it started when I was a teenager. So long story short, I lived in Taiwan for about 7 years. In my teens and early 20s, I did my entire undergraduate degree there at a Taiwanese university that was, the program was taught all in Chinese. I ended up working as a speechwriter for the Taiwanese president, the former Taiwanese president, for about 2 years. And so in that job and living there, I really had a front row seat to a lot of the issues that we're going to be talking about. And from that perspective, the Taiwanese perspective, I really saw how important Taiwan was to the world, right? And so coming back now to the U.S. and to D.C. and hearing these conversations really starting up about Taiwan's importance, I found it to be really, really exciting. And it gets me, excited to talk about it.
Yeah, well, our goal here with this podcast is to bring in Taiwanese voices into the conversation. So whether you're a policymaker, very deeply steeped in these issues, or someone who is just seeking to learn something new, we really hope you learn something from this podcast.
Yeah, I think, speaking of Taiwanese perspectives and Taiwanese voices, today, actually, we do have a very special guest that we're very excited about, who will be coming in to talk more about why Taiwan matters to the world, no matter where you are, right? But I think before we jump into that, it might be helpful to kind of take a step back and maybe just give a sort of basic rundown about Taiwan for our listeners.
Yes, well, Taiwan is an island.
Great place to start.
Taiwan is an island. Geographically, it is located, southeast of the territory that is sometimes referred to as mainland China. Right, there is the Taiwan Strait, which is about 110 miles wide between the People's Republic of China and Taiwan. There are some islands that Taiwan controls that are closer to the mainland, and so you can see, maybe from a mile or two away, right, China. So it's very close, right? We're not talking about miles and miles and miles. It's a very small geography.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually looked this up before we recorded, and Taiwan's area, to give people a sense of scale, is about 14,000 square miles. So for our U.S. listeners, you can think of that as a little bit smaller than Maryland and Delaware combined, right? So we are not talking about a very big place.
So given that I'm from California, I like to think about it this way, right? You can fit 11 Taiwans in California.
Yeah, I guess if you want to think about it that way, you could fit about 4 Taiwans into Iowa.
And that's incredible, right? Because Taiwan has such a large population. There are 23 million people. And so fitting all that into such a small space. Language-wise, Mandarin Chinese is the main language, written and spoken. But Taiwanese, Taiyu, is also extremely frequently spoken. You also have different indigenous languages. And so Taiwan's actually a lot more diverse than it may seem on face value.
Yeah, and, speaking of sort of packing a punch, that's also true economically. Despite its size, Taiwan's GDP in 2024 was about $775 billion. And a lot of that, of course, comes from some of the high-tech products that we best know Taiwan for, especially things like computer chips that are probably in most of the things you're seeing in this room right now, whether it's our microphones, our computers, the TV behind us, they're all running off of that.
Taiwan's main trading partner is the PRC, but the United States comes up right behind that at number 2. Interestingly, Taiwan is the 8th largest trading partner of the United States, and Taiwan therefore ranks higher than a lot of other G20 partners, such as France and Brazil. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
The main source of foreign investment in Taiwan is also the Netherlands. I think that definitely has something to do with the ASML lithography machines. And they protect those like their royalty, right? Whenever a machine arrives, I heard that they have full security for that machine. The United States is also the second largest source of foreign direct investment.
Yeah, so really an important partner for the U.S. kind of across the board. But I think this is going to be the part of the introduction that gets a little bit tricky, right? Getting into sort of Taiwan's political situation. Because I think everything we've talked about so far, Taiwan sounds like a really successful country across the board. But the fact of the matter is that it's not recognized legally as a country by most places around the world. So I think as of right now, Taiwan has 12 diplomatic allies that recognize Taiwan as a country, and they're mostly small countries in the South Pacific, the Caribbean, or Central America.
And the Vatican.
Yes, can't forget that one.
Topic for another episode. Yeah, and you're exactly right. In fact, I'll try to explain it very briefly, and we can get into this in future episodes. But the modern day government is, I guess, technically called the Republic of China, and that government was born on January 1st, 1912, on the mainland, or in the territory now controlled by the PRC. And they celebrate National Day on October 10th in commemoration of the fall of the Qing dynasty, right? So this is very steeped in, I guess, literally the end of the Chinese dynasties. Taiwan's modern-day government kind of came out after the Chinese Civil War that was fought between the Chinese Communist Party and the KMT, the Kuomintang, or Nationalist Party, that ended up retreating to Taiwan. And as we know, the CCP won that war, or at least won control of the main territory of China. And so when the KMT retreated to Taiwan, they instituted martial law for about 40 years. So that was 1949 to 1987. Eventually, though, Taiwan's government democratized on its own, right? And they held their first election in 1996. So Taiwan is a very, very young democracy. As someone pointed out to me recently, you can think about it in terms of U.S. history, right? Let's say 30 years since the first president in the United States, that was James Monroe. Taiwan is basically in their James Monroe era, given how young they are as a democracy, right? And so I think they're doing pretty well. Our country has a much longer history of democracy, but for them, in the last 10, 20, 30 years, you would not have known that their democracy is so new.
Yeah, and when you think of it that way, I think it's even more amazing the kind of progress that they've made, right? But I think this would be a great time to bring in our guest to tell us more about that journey from where Taiwan was to where it is today. And so we're very excited to welcome our very special guest, Ambassador Alexander Yui.
Well, welcome, Ambassador Yui. Thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure, Chen.
Thank you. And welcome to our office.
Yeah, new office.
I think the last time we saw each other was at the AI Expo for National Competitiveness in D.C. That was May 2024.
Right.
I remember we got to take you around and show you all the new tech and gear. So
exactly. It was quite impressive. And, AI is the new industrial revolution. So you guys are well positioned and well in advance of what's coming. Very important expo.
Thank you. So this is the very first episode of Straightforward, and we wanted to ask you to help us set the scene. Why Taiwan is so important, right? So to start off for our audience, we thought you have a fascinating story and a fascinating career, right? Prior to serving in the United States, you served in the EU. You also, you were the ambassador to Paraguay. You went to Texas A&M, so
Gig 'em.
Can you share your career story, how you became the number one representative from Taiwan in the United States, and also how Taiwan's story kind of changed as well during that time?
Well, thank you, Channing and Libby, for giving me this opportunity to be on your initial podcast, and very happy, and also very happy that you're putting emphasis on Taiwan. And the reason why is because, and this has to do with your question, Taiwan, for the longest of times, we were quite isolated since 1949, when the split between PRC and ROC happened, and we've been struggling ever since. And the changes we've seen for the last few years has been quite remarkable. That from being almost a pariah internationally, or if you want to use the word like the one they used to use in South Africa, apartheid. That's how we felt. We were kept out of the fence. We were the lonesome kid looking at others playing the court while we were waiting, sitting on the bleacher looking at them. Nobody picked us. That type of feeling that we had. But things has changed quite a bit in the last few years, and now this general recognition of Taiwan being a democracy. Being a force for good, being an industrial powerhouse, especially in technology. So this is a change that I've felt in the last few years. But thank you for your compliments on my career. It's been a very multi, schemed, I work both in the bilateral part of diplomacy and also multilateral. I think that's been very. I had this privilege of working on sometimes we were just, once you're thrown into the bilateral, you stay, or even in one area, for example, because I speak Spanish, I'll be put, many of my colleagues just work in the Latin American area for the entire career. But I've been able, lucky to also be sent to other places. I've been in Europe twice, been in North America and South America and Central America, and doing also, and sometime I was doing work for Africa, Middle East, etc. So it's been a very flavorful and multi, aspected work in my career. But I joined Foreign Service because I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to make a difference, especially looking at the difficulties we faced. I grew up looking at the difficulties we faced in Taiwan, and we were, you would see. Countries leaving Taiwan one by one, especially after 1971, we were forced to leave the United Nations. Mm-hmm. There was a whole range of countries leaving Taiwan, or the ROC then, and then United States in 1979 when relations were cut. For many, as I've said this before, it was almost like it was the end of Taiwan. There was people, the whole world was leaving Taiwan. So. But we've endured, and we went with, so that's the background of why I wanted to join the Foreign Service. Actually, my first calling or my first preference was to join the military. But that's another story. But I tried, but actually I wanted to go to West Point. So I was going to I was attending a U.S. high school. Besides being A&M, but my background with the U.S. goes a little further back to high school when I was going to a high school at the Panama Canal Zone, a U.S. territory back then when still a U.S. territory. And it was a DOD high school. Was for, there were a lot of military presence at the Panama Canal Zone then. So, and my schoolmates were all military, Army brats. So I had the they were going to the military academies. I go, I want to do so too. But anyways, at the end, I couldn't, so I didn't. But I went to A&M, which is also the very large, one of the largest ROTC program in the country, in the United States. But I didn't.
I know, it's very fascinating that you have this long history with the United States and served in so many regions that are close to the U.S., right?
But but serving, make a difference. And also that's something that I admire from the United States is many U.S. citizens also have this calling. I asked someone yesterday from the military that served in JAG, Judge Advocate, and he says, well, someone could do a lot of money being a private lawyer. Why do you serve in the military? I go, well, because I want to make a difference. It's a matter of service, and that's really honorable.
Yeah, I really admire that, and especially the fact that you've represented Taiwan in so many different contexts, right? I imagine that you've met a lot of people with a lot of different levels of familiarity with Taiwan, right?
Sure.
So with this podcast, of course, we are thinking of our audience, whether they are policymakers here in DC or other world capitals who work on Taiwan policy, to people who don't know much at all. And so I would love to hear sort of how you introduce Taiwan to people when they're sort of learning about it for the first time.
Well, at least now I used to get sometimes questions like, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Taiwan." They go, "Oh, I love Thai food." I go, "Okay, well, it's close enough."
Some people still say that to me, but it's gotten less.
But no, Taiwan, for people who know who don't really know about Taiwan, well, it's the place where bubble tea was born. Many people don't know
That's
that.
a great claim to fame.
And then it's a place where we serve the best soup dumplings in the world, the Din Tai Fung.
Yes, you do.
There's one beautiful, wonderful place in New York that they opened, the largest one in the world, in Din Tai Fung. But joking aside, Taiwan is a flourishing democracy. Again, it's a technology powerhouse, and we're maybe small, and we're the size of Maryland, about geographically, and population about the size of Florida. But we are your 8th largest trading partner, and we are probably the 21st economy in the world, economically wise. So we're the little engine that could, and that therefore we do should have a space in the international floor.
Yeah, well, despite your very prosperous economy and robust democracy, as you just said, Taiwan faces a lot of challenges as a global actor.
Sure.
As you mentioned earlier, now only 12 countries recognize Taiwan / the ROC. Taiwan is constantly under economic coercion, military aggression, and diplomatic pressure from Beijing. Your office is also called the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office, right, TECRO?
Yeah.
And so that provides a lot of complexity and challenges to your ability to conduct diplomacy, right? We were wondering, can you explain these challenges about how Taiwan can go about in the global order, and how has Taiwan navigated these challenges?
Yeah. Well, we have gone through a lot. And actually, my office is called, TECRO, Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office. But originally, when our embassy left and we set up a presence after 1979, it was called NCAA. And some people thought we were a college basketball. It was North American Coordination Office or something like that, So, but at least now people can relate to Taiwan because it's Taipei, etc. But we've gone through a lot of difficulties. But it's a matter of holding to the values that we cherish. For some, it's worth a lot that we want to be able to live under the way of a lot that we have, that we chose, and that's the reason there's a conflict between Taiwan and mainland China, because it's a matter of different values, different set of ideologies, and different set of rules that we adhere to. And in Taiwan, we chose the path that you have, which is freedom, democracy, and respect for human rights, play by the set of rules and orders that we all follow. And we've persisted at that, but we've been challenged constantly by the PRC that they own us, which they haven't. Actually, when the People's Republic was formed in 1949, October the 1st, they didn't really control Taiwan. They never really controlled Taiwan. But because China PRC is a much larger presence than ours, so we have been at a disadvantage. But again, things have changed, and people have looked at Taiwan and we've insisted on our values, and we've continued to our economic prosperity, and people now more and more so around the world are willing to take a look at Taiwan in a positive way. And now, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the United States or elsewhere, Taiwan is a force for good, and we're a reliable partner. We adhere to the world order that we all follow. And that's who we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. And a very trusted partner as
Yes,
well
of
for
course.
business.
Yeah, and it's great actually that you mentioned Taiwan is a force for good, right? I think Taiwan is also a major force for innovation
Right,
around the
of
world.
course,
I think
yes.
a lot of the innovation that we're talking about today in technologies like AI couldn't happen without some of the contributions that Taiwan has made.
Yeah,
And so, could you talk about how a country that's so small has been able to contribute so much to global innovation?
Well, first of all, I want to clarify, and because there's been some comments about how Taiwan has been taking jobs away from the United States, that we are adversaries in terms of global commerce. But actually, in terms of technology, specifically in the semiconductor industry, we're actually partners. We have a very good symbiosis. Most of the chip designs comes from your side, AMD, NVIDIA, etc., even Intel. And they do the design, and our company is mostly TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. They do the manufacturing. They make it possible, for the physical product to be. And then, so actually, we manufacture the chips that you sell. So actually, for every dollar of a semiconductor being sold, U.S. companies earn about 38 cents, I think. And our companies earn around 11 cents. So actually, that's a pretty good partnership. But innovation comes from a discipline and also from good choices. And but Taiwan was not always a tech powerhouse. We when 1949, when the government was transferred from mainland China to Taiwan, the economy was based on bananas, sugarcane, rice, and pineapples. That was our economy. But it's a series of correct measures and policies, turning from agriculture to light industries, heavy industries, and technology. It's a range of choices that were made and decisions and applying to that. But also human capital. We devote a lot of resources to develop our human resources, and nowadays, semiconductor industry is because we've had a very a bountiful, specially trained engineers that tackles that. But again, we are very good partners at that, and the fact that our companies are investing in the United States, particularly the most, the stellar case is the TSMC factory in the fabs, actually more than just one, in Arizona, and that's a good example of our partnership. We can make all those semiconductors all in Taiwan. Again, we're the size of Maryland, but the need for chips is humongous for what's coming. Whether it's super chips, which now we make more than 92% of the chips in the world, super chips, and more than 60% of the regular chips, legacy chips. But the demand for chips is much greater than we can produce in Taiwan. So having overseas, factories, it only makes sense. So not only Arizona, but in Japan and in Dresden and Germany, etc. But I think that trend will just continue. And I think it's actually we are in this case interconnected between Taiwan and partner countries as part of this ecosystem of production of semiconductors.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I find it also exciting because as TSMC and other Taiwanese, whether it's food or companies go out, then more people around the world are learning about Taiwan as well.
Right.
So,
but it's not only, TSMC going to Arizona, and then it's not just one company. It's a whole, it's a string of companies that complement, partners that complement the big factory. And also, there comes, restaurants, services.
So Ding Tai Fung in
Tai
Arizona.
Yeah, probably, but I would like to see it first in D.C. before they go to Arizona. But for example, in Kumamoto, which was a small town in Japan, and now it has completely turned around the city because now it's a thriving city of not only because of the TSMC factory. Lots of other companies and restaurants and social activities has thrived because of that investment. So I can look for the same that will happen in Arizona or elsewhere in the United States.
Every state in the U.S. is going to be vying
Bubble
for
tea,
the
bubble
next.
tea and Ding Tai Fung, yes.
Yeah, no, that's such a great story because I think it's also a great reminder that at the heart of all of the innovation and the technological progress that we talk about are people, right? It really,
yes.
it really impacts people's real lives.
Yeah, but one of the things we're concentrating now is, well, people look at the money aspect about the factories, but actually it's the human capital that make it work. Mm-hmm. So currently, we started some time ago to work with U.S. Not only companies but universities in this collaboration of turning out these capable engineers and hands that can run these companies. And that's something that we're putting a lot of emphasis on, because actually there's not enough human resources for what's coming, and we're doing with partnerships with a lot of universities around the country, A&M being one of them, and to do this collaboration between Taiwanese and U.S. universities and universities with other countries too.
Yeah, I mean, that's been happening for a long time. My father came to the United States to study originally, so.
Really? Okay. Great. Wonderful. See?
So now to turn the topic back to democracy.
Yes.
Right? Taiwan is seen by many as a democratic success story. But of course, that is not easy when you're facing persistent threats from across the strait.
Sure.
Of course, the PRC has every intention to disrupt the success that you've had as a very strong society. I would love for you to share a little bit about why Taiwan's democratic success is not guaranteed, because we see all the trends rising, right? You had another very successful election, smooth transition of power, but again, it's not guaranteed in the future. And I would love for you to just speak a little bit more to that.
Well, Taiwan's democracy is, the evolution into a democracy. Obviously, it took some time, but luckily, there was very little bloodshed. There was no revolution per se. But there was a political transition from a strong-willed, people in government, Chiang Kai-shek, his son, Chiang Ching-kuo, but slowly evolving to a democracy. There was a lot of dissidents during those times, and now the dissidents are now in government, mainly DPP. But this evolution into democracy is something fairly recent. Our first change in government between two political parties happened in the year 2000, when KMT gave power to the DPP. So it's a fairly recent thing, and we're maturing as a democracy. You will see our legislature, our Congress, they tend to get into fistfights and throw water bottles around, and so it's a messy thing, but it's a process we're learning. But it's better for them to be fighting inside than the people fighting outside in the streets. So, but it's a learning process. But as you mentioned, democracy is a fragile thing. Look at, who would have thought South Korea could be in the position they're in right now? The democracy has to be constantly nurtured, but also we need support from our friends. Again, Taiwan has been isolated for a long time, but in the last, say, 5-6 years, even, we've been getting recognition from the rest of the world, but for Taiwan to continue to be a democracy, we need the support from the rest of the world to look at who we are and give the positive affirmation that this is the way to go. Sometimes, again, people who not really are into the politics or into what's going on in the Pacific will say, well, in the past, people will ask me, well, PRC has this one country, two system scheme they're doing in Hong Kong, so why don't you take it? They're a large country, and we'll say, yeah, okay, well, the problem is Hong Kong didn't have a choice, or Macau, they were colonies, and they were returned to mainland China. The people didn't have a choice because it was a colony, but in our case, we're not. The people of Taiwan, we do have a choice, so we chose not to be part of them. We chose not to live under their system, and that's why we are at odds with each other, and they're sending all these planes and ships around Taiwan to threaten our livelihood and our existence. But look at how Hong Kong turned out, Now it's just any other Chinese city, under very strict laws and rules, and their liberties are tightly controlled by technology that they use. By the way, the way they use technology is to control their people, and the way we use technology is to actually make our lives better. So that's the difference between them and us, and it's important to keep at it. We think that we are at the forefront of defending democracy, against the communism and under this authoritarian regimes, and again, but as more countries and more partners and allies are working together, we'll be stronger. But it is a defining moment. There's strong forces that want to change the rule-based world order, and we have to persist and make sure that they don't win over the values that we cherish.
I actually think that was such a great point you made about democracy, just acknowledging that sometimes it can be
it
messy,
does,
but
yes.
also that democracy allows for a little bit of mess, right?
Of
Sometimes
course,
we have to figure things out, and that's a system that allows for different voices to be heard.
Sure.
But, in terms of what you just mentioned about it really being a defining point, right? I think anybody who's been watching the news in the past few years has probably seen more and more stories about Chinese military incursions kind of pushing closer and closer to Taiwan, right? And maybe for those less familiar, they don't really know how to interpret the significance of that or maybe what's changed. And so I would love if you could talk a little about how that threat has changed over the course of your career.
Yeah. Well, when Speaker Nancy Pelosi made a visit to Taiwan 2.5 years ago, maybe. I think it was in August. Obviously, the mainland China said, "Oh, you crossed the red line. This is not permitted. Taiwan should be isolated, and no one can acknowledge. Shouldn't be anyone from outside visiting Taiwan, especially the speaker." So therefore, they sort of wanted to punish us by sending ships and planes to surround Taiwan. Around the identification zones, and there used to be a medium line between the Taiwan Straits, an invisible medium line that both sides respected for decades, and then they said, well, we don't see any medium lines since today. There's no longer a medium line, and their ships and planes started crossing the medium line almost every day now. But they used Speaker Pelosi as a pretext. That they have crossed their own red line, while their claim that Taiwan is theirs, and therefore nobody should interfere in their quest to absorb Taiwan into part of theirs. But that's just an excuse, because again, when we had elections in January of last year, and President Lai Ching-te won and became president, they also launched a series of exercises. So whenever they don't like it, they launch these exercises. For example, when my president gave a speech during his inauguration in May, they launched exercises. When he gave a speech on October 10th during National Day, they launched some exercise. Basically, it's just, whenever we do something that projects that we are who we are, they want to punish us. But their goal and their quest to take Taiwan as their own has never changed since they became a People's Republic, a communist regime in 1949. That quest has never changed. We have to make sure that they can't get their way, around getting Taiwan, and whatever excuse that they will take, it's just an excuse, because their final objective will never change. That's why the U.S. and many friends have been helping us to increase or to improve our deterrence, our ability to defend ourselves, to keep away the Chinese aggression against Taiwan. And that's the way we're trying. Again, we're not part of them. We've never been part of them, the PRC, and they have not because they want something and they wish it becomes true. And that's what they're saying. All the time they say, "Oh, Taiwan is part of us." So you all have to listen, because this is not because, again, just because you tell a lie 1,000 times becomes the truth or reality.
We call it wishful thinking.
Yeah, it's wishful thinking. It's as if Kim Jong-un says, South Korea is mine, so therefore you all should acknowledge that South Korea is mine. It's the same wishful thinking from the Chinese, the PRC part. But again, we will do our best, and we are the people of Taiwan are conscious of this challenge and threat. And for example, Ukraine has given the people of Taiwan a reality check. We've been at odds with each other for 75 years. It's not that Nancy Pelosi, the speaker, came and then things started. No, it has been like this for 75 years since they became founding the PRC in 1949. But it got more and more. They got more and more aggressive in the last few years because their economy has prospered. They have more money. Their military. They spend a lot of money to improving their military capabilities. So now they think that they're able to do some actual threat and conflict against Taiwan. But again, we want to make sure that they can get what they want to do, which is to conquer and to take Taiwan as their own.
So, of course, the people of Taiwan, the government of Taiwan, Taiwan's military even, they're not passively watching these developments, right? You are definitely being proactive in trying to address them. And so could you talk a little bit about how you're doing that?
Taiwan as a democracy, it has to be cherished and maintained, nurtured by all of us. It's not just the defense of Taiwan. It's not just about the military. Although in the last few years, our deterrence, our capability has increased considerably. I think, based on the Taiwan Relations Act and also the 6 assurances given by the United States, that we've been able to build on that. But at the same time, it's the whole of society that is responsible to maintain this that we are sovereign and separate from PRC's ambitions. So it's not just the military aspect of modernizing or improving the capabilities, but also the whole society. We've improved and make changes to improve our reserve mechanisms, our civil defense, our whole of society resiliency, which includes energy, food, even communications resilient. In case of major catastrophes or crisis, our society is building on and getting more and more prepared for this. And again, with our expenditures on military resources, it's not just on military hardware, but also on the things that I just talked about. Mm-hmm. And we've increased our budget for these purposes quite considerably. And again, people in Taiwan are resilient, and also we are conscious of the threats that we face. For example, during the elections 2023, at the end of 23, President Tsai decided to expand the time for conscription. It used to be at that time was 4 months. She decided that after consultations that conscript needed more time to be prepared, so it was decided to extend it to 1 year during the election year, which was risky. But people in Taiwan generally accepted it. Says, well, I think this is what we need. So now it's conscription and service is 1 year. Mm-hmm. And people accepted it and they get their training and will be better prepared to face aggressions as reserves if needed.
Yeah. Now, on a more positive note, right, as you alluded to, the United States and Taiwan have had a very long and positive relationship. Yeah. Ups and downs here and there, but overall positive. And so it's a new year. It's 2025. We've seen in recent months, even currently ongoing, right, discussions for double taxation agreements.
Yes.
Of course, the manufacturing, the TSMC factory in Arizona, right, all these new investments. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for 2025 between our two countries?
Well, for 2025 U.S.-Taiwan relations, one of the things that we look forward to is ADTA, the Avoidance of Double Taxation Bill that is being proposed in Congress. We had hoped that it would pass last year, but it was, for whatever reasons, the election part of it got in the way. So, and we're happy to see that Congress is retaking that and put it in a fast track. Hopefully, it will be voted and handled in a very quick way. But ADTA, the Avoidance of Double Taxation, is important because it's an added incentive for our companies, for both countries, Taiwanese and companies trying to invest in the United States, as well as U.S. companies going to Taiwan to invest. There is a added incentive for them to relocate their manufacturing in these two countries. Actually, Taiwanese companies, manufacturers are leaving mainland China for many reasons. partly because they're very hostile towards Taiwan. Passed laws that are very risky for Taiwanese companies to continue working in mainland China. Other reasons, the economy, their cost of production, etc. So they're leaving in large numbers from China, but they want to relocate elsewhere. The United States is a very obvious choice, and especially with ADTA, they'll pass. Also, we've last year we extended the Economic Prosperity Partnership Dialogue and for another 5 years. So we look forward that in this year, under the new administration, the last 4 years was a very fruitful dialogue, but hopefully in this new, with the new administration coming in from the United States, we'll continue to have this very prosperous and fruitful discussion, especially in technology, and also working with third countries. And also, so from economic and commercial prospects in 2025, I think will be a great year for both of us.
It's been so great to have you here today with us,
Yes.
Ambassador Yui, especially as our first guest, to help set the stage for why Taiwan matters. But one thing that we want to do with all of our guests is, in the spirit of, getting to know Taiwan better, we would love to have guests recommend something from Taiwan.
Sure.
It could be a book, a place, a policy that you're really proud of, a
Food.
food, really anything that you think could help people get to know Taiwan. And so if you were to do that, what would you recommend?
There's been a lot of books written about Taiwan recently. Obviously, it's about the challenges that we face, against aggression. But Matt Pottinger wrote this Boiling Moat, which I think it's a very good read to understand what's going on and what steps should be taken. So that's one book I would recommend. Although there's been many books written on Taiwan, which are all good. But for movies, I won't point to any particular movies, but on Netflix. There's a very good wide array of choices for Taiwanese drama and movies, and be it romantic, being this action, etc. So I would recommend going to Netflix and and just punch in Taiwan drama or Taiwan, and you will see a lot of pretty good. It's not just Korean, Squid Games which are
Libby's
good.
smiling because I'm sure she
Yeah.
watches a lot.
Fun fact, that is one of the first ways I came to know about Taiwan
Oh,
was
really?
through Taiwanese television.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I fully endorse this recommendation.
And food, well, we talked about Din Tai Fung, which is available in the United States, mostly in the West Coast, but they opened one in New York recently, which is the soup dumplings. Wonderful food. It's a very good expression of what Taiwan is. But also the bubble tea. Again, a lot of people don't know that bubble tea started in Taiwan, actually in Taichung, center of Taiwan. But yeah. So this will be my recommendations.
That's a great list. You can get bubble tea and Din Tai Fung, take it
Yeah.
home, and watch
Yeah.
Taiwanese shows on
Exactly.
Netflix.
There you
That's
go, and then read a
wonderful.
book after. Well, thank you, Ambassador.
It's a pleasure.
Yu. Thank you so much for
Shannon
joining
and
us.
Libby, thank you very much for having me on this first podcast.
Libby, what a wonderful way to start off straightforward by having Ambassador Yu come here and talk to us about his experience as a diplomat at a time where U.S.-Taiwan relations were really, really progressing. As we heard from him, there's been a lot of changes. There have been a lot of ups and downs with the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, but right now really is that opportune moment to have these conversations about Taiwan. Right? Ambassador himself talked about the importance of technology to Taiwan economically, for their society, but obviously internationally. Right? Democracy, of course, is going to continue to be a theme throughout our podcast, throughout Taiwan's existence, throughout all of SESP's work. Right? So these themes are all coming back, and I think that was just a wonderful introduction to this really important topic.
Yeah, and as you said, it's a great moment to be having these conversations about Taiwan, but also, having these conversations with experts from Taiwan, right? Because as we think about how the U.S. can engage with Taiwan in new and more creative ways, I think it's really important to do that with an understanding of Taiwan itself, right? Where Taiwan is coming from, where it is now, and where it's going into the future.
Yeah, and so if our listeners have any feedback, we would love to hear it.
We already have some really exciting guests lined up for our future episodes. I think we really want to start by giving people a good grounding in Taiwan. So we're going to start from maybe more of a historical standpoint, looking at, for instance, the process through which Taiwan democratized, Taiwan's tech development, how it came to be the powerhouse that it is today. We'll dive a little bit into Taiwanese politics and look at some of the major political parties and how they think of Taiwan's future.
Yeah, so full disclaimer on our first few episodes for our audience listening, right? We really wanted to give that strong foundation because anytime you're trying to understand a new country, a new nation, any new history, any new topic, really, a new people, right? There is just so much foundational understanding that we would love to just have a conversation about here in the present day because it still is very, very relevant to the current situation that we find ourselves in. So for our listeners, we have a lot of great content coming up. Hopefully, we'll give you a very well-rounded understanding of Taiwan. And then we can also, of course, go into those more juicy topics in the future. So stay tuned for all of that.
Yeah, but thank you for joining us today for our first episode of the podcast, and we're very excited for you to tune in the future as well.
Yeah, we look forward
Straightforward.
to seeing you next time. Bye.